Welcome to Batch and Scale, the Healthy Food Financing Podcast, brought to you by Eats Place. This podcast explores the dollars and cents behind our food. I'm your host, Katie Chang, and in this series, we're diving into the economics of healthy food, looking at its journey from harvest to home and all the points in between. In this fourth episode, we're jumping right into the currents that are remaking our plates, the future of food, trends, and innovations. We're talking about the huge financial bets being placed on plant forward, the logistics of local food webs, and the rush of technology changing how we interact and shop. These trends require massive capital, forward thinking strategy, and smart spending. The pace of change can make a person feel whisked away. How do we ensure that innovation translates into access, not just higher prices? We'll be talking to one of the key leaders guiding this transition, Caroline Howe, Director of Food Policy at the DC Office of Planning, to understand how city initiatives and financial planning are responding to this wave of change. The story of food innovation is always grounded in community. Throughout this series, we've been following the ambitious project to open a new grocery store in the Anacostia neighborhood of Washington, D.C. by Dreaming Out Loud. Their work is a vital case study on how new financial models and logistical innovations can be used to overcome entrenched food access challenges. We'll talk to Riddick to gain more insight and hear updates on the project, with its success illustrating the potential for healthy food trends to drive equitable outcomes. We'll speak with Jessica Sidman, the food editor at Washingtonian, to explore the impact of consumer preferences on the future of food retail. Join us for a taste of the future as we explore the financials shaping our next meal. Let's dig in. The perspective from Caroline Howe, Director of Food Policy at the DC Office of Planning, is crucial, as their decisions offer a blueprint on how cities nationwide can embrace new trends and innovations equitably. We spoke about the major emerging trends they're tracking, the financial hurdles communities of all sizes might encounter when trying to fund food initiatives, and examples from Washington, D.C. on how strategic financing directly transformed food access. Today we have a fantastic guest joining us, Caroline Howe, DC's Food Policy Director.
Thank you for inviting me, Katie.
Can I just say your perspective is so valuable because we're diving deep into Washington, D.C.'s food scene, the trends and innovations we're discussing, and they really offer a blueprint for healthy food ecosystems everywhere. And these solutions that could be used for scaling in any community committed to a healthier food future. So thank you.
I love that. Yeah, I think there's so much that I am grateful to learn from other cities and to share with other cities about what we've tried so that we can all be learning and growing and making the changes we need to see.
So, from your perspective at the DC Food Policy Council, what are major emerging food trends that you believe will significantly impact urban food systems? How is the council positioning itself and preparing to engage with all these new food trends?
I think I'll take that in a few different, I'd say two trends in two different parts of the food system. One we're seeing on the restaurant side, and I do think that that is a place where there is such a significant percentage of the district that is employed in food service. And so these changes to district restaurants are impacting so many of us and the district as a whole. And so I think that we're seeing, unfortunately, a real dip in the middle of the food system. So we're seeing growth of fast casual and then a growth of really high end dining. And then in the middle, restaurants really struggling to make when they are trying to serve an affordable meal but give a really quality dining in person experience, just really struggling when we see food costs rising, we see the cost of equipment rising, we see labor costs rising, which they need to in order to continue to serve and give people a living wage in the food system. But restaurants are really feeling pinched in all of that. I'd say that those are sort of on the restaurant side, the trends that we're seeing and really trying to pay attention to. I think the way that we're looking at that is how we're encouraging more people working in the food system to think about how they can be creating and making their own food products. I've been lucky to be working in the district for 8 years with food entrepreneurs. And I think we're really at a moment of really cracking open many more kitchen spaces for people to be able to use, in particular in Ward 7 and 8, where we haven't had commercial kitchen space. There's a number of shared commercial kitchens coming online this year that will give people that space to be making prepared foods. We worked really hard to change cottage food legislation so people could make foods at home. But also with these shared commercial kitchens, people can be making, catering, and manufacturing. And because of delivery, which is the next trend I'll touch on, the possibility for people building a market through social media, through their community, and then just directly delivering food to people, that is going to change where people will be employed in the food system. And I think allow a much greater diversity of really affordable foods, prepared foods, reaching Ward 7 and 8, and all across the city where we need it. Now, the other big trend that I want to talk about is around food access and thinking about grocery and food retail. And for the district has been a priority that's been at the top of our minds for over a decade. My office, the Food Policy Office and the Food Policy Council, will celebrate a decade in 2026. And it has been a priority for that entire time to be increasing food access, retail food access, grocery access in Ward 7 and 8. We still see the numbers that we have seen for a decade in terms of the small number of grocery stores and the massive need for food access. Unfortunately, I'll also say that we see a challenging trend of grocery stores not opening and, in fact, threatening to close or closing. We have, for the last decade, tried to be bringing more grocery stores to Ward 7 and 8, and that is still a priority, and there are many that are set to come online in the coming years. However, I'll also say we're really looking at how do we get people to food and food to people. Online food delivery is a massively, not just for people's dinners, but for grocery. 10% of all SNAP purchases in the district were online purchases for delivery. And that is from 0 to 10% in the only 3 years that that's actually been available in the district. But we know that there's an increasing amount of delivery. And so we've been working with the Department of Health, DC Health, and local philanthropy to look at how we can pilot online delivery and address things like the delivery fees. If you are paying with SNAP, you still have to pay the delivery fee on a separate card. If we're looking at other kinds of payment, how do we reduce costs and really help people? And then how do we get food to people? The healthy corner stores in the district has been an incredible success and something that other cities are replicating, which is to say bringing healthy fresh produce into our corner stores across the district. But we're looking at how do we take that to the next level? How do we support small to medium format retail stores? How do we really look at the mix of food retail that a neighborhood needs? That in reality, if we are looking at the prices at something like Costco, which so many people in the district rely on for that low cost food, how are communities coming together to buy in bulk, whether that is from Costco or from local farms? How do we get those goods at low cost, enable people to be supporting farmers markets with all of the produce incentives that we have and expanding farmers markets, but then also recognizing that you still need toilet paper and you still need aluminum foil, whatever those things are that you need to be getting at a store, and your pantry goods. How are we making sure that we are getting people healthier options when it comes to grains and pantry staples in their communities through all of the tools at our disposal? So really thinking about we need to be looking at every option available to us. When grocery stores have said they would need, in addition to the tax incentives we've offered, $5 to $12 million per store to be opening. What else could we be doing? Is it we all want to see more grocery stores in Ward 7 and 8. And if we're looking at that kind of multi-million-dollar investment to bring a grocery store in, how do we select the really top priority neighborhoods where we most need that, where the most people can get to them, and that food can get to the most number of people from those stores? And then how do we look at all of the other solutions that will meet our food access needs?
You said many insightful things. There's a challenge, it's challenging, but there's also a lot of opportunities there. There's a lot of innovation happening, especially with culturally relevant and diverse offerings, and how that can be expanded and built upon with more retail opening or online delivery and really meeting consumers where they are. If we can switch over and talk about the financial side of these developments, where do cities like Washington, D.C. primarily source the funding, get the resources for for the initiatives that support a healthier food environment? Are there specific types of established programs, whether it's federal or local models?
I think we were lucky to have so many ideas on hand that when COVID hit and we were able to access those ARPA dollars, the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, we moved a lot of funding into food access initiatives that were ready to go. So, for example, the Food Access Fund, which has distributed more than $26 million into food establishments in Ward 7 and 8, those were all funds that came from the American Rescue Plan Act. We also received American Rescue Plan Act dollars to support reducing food waste across our businesses. That is a huge cost for our businesses in terms of food that they are purchasing that they are then throwing away. And so with those funds, we were able to really help businesses make the investments, improving cold storage, improving preparation practices, investing in things like dehydration or flash freezing. How can they make the most of the food that they're purchasing? And that also came from ARPA dollars. And we were ready to go because the district had made small investments to pilot programs like that. I think Nourish DC is an incredible example of how the district leverages federal, local, and philanthropic dollars. The district invested just about $2 million in Nourish DC in creating a program that would bring together community development finance institutions, TA technical assistance providers, to be supporting food businesses in a collective approach across the city, reaching many different diverse communities. After that initial investment, those finance institutions put in their own dollars to make those loans, knowing that the local dollars were securing many of those loans. And so many more millions of dollars were leveraged from those organizations. But we also demonstrated something that local philanthropy was ready to invest in. So we received more millions of dollars from organizations locally that wanted to be supporting particular aspects of what Nourish DC was doing. And then, of course, Nourish was in a position to apply for federal dollars like this Healthy Food Financing Initiative. The DC Central Kitchen, which runs the Healthy Corner Stores program, does receive local dollars from DC Health to run the Healthy Corner Stores program. And that's because we know that there are real health benefits of having more produce, more accessible to more people. And those are health benefits that directly return to the district. And it is not just based on return on investment from a health perspective, but it does really return in terms of the savings that we're seeing when people have better access to food is one of the biggest determinants of health. The last way I'll say that the district does get sort of the funding to support our food programs is very creative partnerships. So we do a lot of partnerships with local universities that access different kinds of research dollars. So we're doing a research project with George Washington University right now looking at crime in retail. So we know that for many retailers, crime is both a real challenge and a narrative used to explain why grocery stores are closing that isn't accurately portraying the realities in each neighborhood. The other piece of if there is theft of food, it is because people are hungry and cannot afford it. At the same time, we're seeing a little bit of a downward spiral in terms of how responses to crime make it less appealing to go to a grocery store when it feels like you a highly secured environment get that stress and anxiety. And so we're working to really understand what interventions are working. How do we really maintain a dignified shopping experience and really understand what kinds of crime are really happening? If the district is investing in preventing this, how are we doing it right? And so a program like that is funded. We supported George Washington University in applying for a research grant for that project. And ditto for American University, their Healthy Schools, Healthy Communities program, which has been making micro grants into the food system, is funded funded by a mix of national philanthropy and the university funds and federal research dollars. And so all of those together, that program is something that I sit on the advisory board of. I'm very excited to see how we work with those research institutions as well. We definitely every year analyze the district's budget to think about how we're using local funds best. The district invests millions of dollars across the food system. Every year, we make a public report of where those dollars are going and encourage residents to have their voices heard about where they want to see more funds go.
That is great. The multiplier effect of food money, how it resonates and goes through so many different paths. That's really the beauty and power of food, how it touches on all aspects of our lives. It's clear that securing these resources is a critical piece of the healthy food system. So, what do you see that some of the biggest financial hurdles or challenges that cities can encounter when they're trying to fund these food initiatives? Are there common challenges that resonate across different urban centers nationally?
Absolutely. I feel so lucky that as a part of the US Conference of Mayors, there is a network of food policy advisors across the country. So 40 of us from cities all across the country are able to gather monthly and talk about our challenges. And certainly, I'll say that funding is one of them. Many cities across the country are facing what the district is, which is a prospect of declining tax revenue and thus tighter budgets. And so that means decreases in staffing in our offices, and that means decreases in local funding for these food programs. That said, having an annual budget cycle that is not necessarily guaranteed to continue the next year, that every year we are deciding whether or not our food programs will continue, is very challenging. And I think that's extra true for a program, for example, like Sunbucks, which the district was in a unique position of being both city and state in running a program like that, which got households during the summer $120 per child to use as food benefits when schools were out of session. And that's something that does support food retailers. That is more money that families have to go and spend at grocery stores, at their farmers markets, at their corner stores that accept SNAP. And so that really had an impact. That was $9 million coming into the district through Sunbucks. And yet, if we can't guarantee our local match for administration, it is very challenging to invest in some key parts of the year before budgets are loaded, before budgets are decided, in terms of really making the investments in outreach and education, not to mention the technology to improve those. So, that multi year funding is a real barrier that so many cities face. And that is another reason why both my office and so many of our partners across the country work really closely with local nonprofits to say, okay, how can nonprofits who do have funding that can be more guaranteed, that can carry funds year after year in a way that many city governments cannot, how do we work with them to be running these kinds of programs? And so I think that that's one solution. But the other challenge that I would say is this balance between what is happening at a city level, what's happening at a county level, what's happening state and nationally. I think that there are both opportunities to leverage these different scales of influence, and it is something that we are unique in the district in being city and state simultaneously.
You bring up a really great point about these hyper local solutions to very human challenges and how different communities solve them and collectively share their knowledge and their learnings.
That's one of the things that most excites me, both about the podcast that you're doing and about the networks that we have created as food advisors across the country. Is the fact that, for example, Baltimore piloted online delivery with local funds much sooner than we did. We've been able to learn so much from them as we scale up our own projects here in the district. Similarly, the district has invested in programs to support our restaurants. Our food waste innovation grants were the first of their kind in the country, and other cities have been able to learn from what we did by investing those ARPA dollars and then local funds in those programs. And so this sort of exchange is so important because we cannot all be investing in the innovation in exactly the same ways. all at the same time. And so working with both between ourselves, but also with national philanthropic investors, the Partnership for Healthy America is a great example of this, where they are working with many cities across the country with this Good Food City goal of doubling our produce consumption by 2030. And I think it's a very audacious and exciting goal, but really thinking about, okay, we are each piloting different pieces of that. How are we making sure that we're coordinating and not making the same mistakes simultaneously, but also really learning from those who are even 6 months or a year ahead in trying one solution or another?
You did mention one of the food waste initiatives. I know it is a significant challenge. When it comes to large scale recovery, upcycling, or composting programs, are you seeing any innovative financing models or partnerships to fund these efforts?
I'm so glad you asked. It is one of my things that I am most proud of us in the district. The district has really been doing creative work around food waste for well over a decade. And so, those food waste innovation grants that I mentioned, in terms of how those are being financed, as that is another district program that is never guaranteed. I think that's been a really interesting place where, after piloting it, we were able to get a local philanthropy, the Morningstar Foundation, which has been deeply invested in the district, to actually create this Keeping It Cool grant through Nourish DC, which specifically looks at cold storage. And, Katie, I don't want to toot your own horn, but I think the partnership with Eats Place was really inspiring to me, that the district looked at, okay, how do we actually work with a local community development finance institution to be making low cost loans for these investments? And I think that that communicates to people, you will save money from this investment and you will be able to get that return.
That is a great example of showing how the money was flowing to make these initiatives possible through strategic financing, philanthropic partners, CDFI partners. So thank you. And it's really amazing to see how that money has directly transformed food access, food security.
Absolutely. I do think that that is such an important part for me when we think about food retail and how we are going to be able to get more fresh food into our corner stores. It does need to be an investment in cold storage, in refrigeration, to be able to better refrigerate and present our fresh produce, but it is also around investing in some food processing. Grocery stores are able to sell the produce that they do because they also have a kitchen where they are chopping the melon and then selling chopped melon from the melons that couldn't be sold because there was a damaged piece. Or those prepared salads that you are paying a premium for at a grocery store are made with produce that could not be sold and is still great and is still good, but is not presentable for the shelf. That is so important, to be thinking about how we're really setting our small food retailers up for success in that way, to be selling produce, but also working with produce to make food that can also be sold. And so I think that's one reason we're seeing more and more of our small food retailers. Dreaming Out Loud, which has long been a key player in the urban agriculture space and in the food system as a food hub, has invested in their first food retail outlet thanks to district investments through the Food Access Fund and Nourish DC, and philanthropic investment, fundraising, and some federal funds as well. But that Dreaming Out Loud, the Marionberry Market, is a great example of where you'll be having that food hub work, distributing fresh produce, food retail, but then also a kitchen that is preparing the produce that cannot and is not sold into meals. So you constantly have that flow of fresh foods through it. And I think that we see that with the Fresh Food Factory as well, another incredible Ward 8 owned food retailer in that sort of small format footprint of getting people fresh produce, but also creatively thinking about how are the other ways that you're making that work. I think in both cases, I'll also say that what we're seeing as a point of success for small food retailers is selling prepared foods and selling those higher margin products like coffee, like cocktails. And so that you are simultaneously managing a very low margin industry, which is food retail, grocery, and then much higher margin. And so, really thinking about mixing those and mixing the goods and services happening. The same I touched on shared kitchens, one of those will be at the Marion Berry Market. And so, you're combining things we know we need for food access and for the food system writ large, but that also are revenue generating for a business that is committed to paying its workers and enabling food access.
I love all these unique pathways to collaboration. For our listeners, how might these local food retailers, producers, manufacturers partner with you and government programs and different initiatives?
There's a great, easy way to see what we're up to, which is our website, dcfoodpolicy.org. You can also follow us on our social media at DC Food Policy on all of the platforms.
And for listeners who are passionate about the future of food in their own cities and their own places, what is one actionable piece of advice to help them engage with and contribute to healthy food financing?
People do not realize and vastly underestimate the power they have in influencing their local budget decisions. So, I'd encourage you to look up when your next local budget hearing is and show up. Say what you want to see your local dollars going to. What part of the food system do you want to see your city invest in? Because whether you have a city council or a mayor, regardless of what kind of decision making you have in your district, whether or not you have a food policy council, your elected officials listen in those fora and they do make decisions based on that. So it is now easier than ever because almost every city has an online testifying option. You can also just submit a letter. And honestly, people who submit a 2 sentence email saying, I care about the food system and there is nowhere for me to find this in my neighborhood. Or I love what you've done with this particular program. I want that to be accessible to everyone in my neighborhood. Whatever it is, it does not have to be long, it does not have to be dramatic, but it makes a difference. And that is the one thing I'd leave your listeners with. Whether you are a retailer, whether you are just a passionate resident who cares about the food system, use your voice.
After hearing how finances grow food innovation at the city level, the challenge becomes ensuring these benefits are widely shared. New food trends, whether plant based or technology driven, are often costly to implement and require significant infrastructure investment. This financial reality means that economically challenged areas like Anacostia are frequently the last to benefit. Now, we check back in on the efforts to defy that trend with the project to establish a new grocery store in the Anacostia neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Dreaming Out Loud's work is a fight to bring modern food access to a community that traditional financial models have largely ignored.
You know, when you go into most grocery stores, it's like you get in, you get out, right? It's not necessarily a pleasant experience. Sometimes it's dark depending on where you go. I've been in grocery stores where like you got to go down the stairs into like a basement to go to a grocery store. So my name is Christian. I'm the Dream Program Manager. So I run the Food and Agriculture Program in Dreaming Out Loud, which focuses on supporting food and agriculture entrepreneurs, helping them to scale their businesses, primarily in Ward 7 and Ward 8 within DC. So you have the Dream Program, which is focused on our entrepreneurs, helping them to create income opportunities and also create a workforce. What are entrepreneurs? They solve problems. And so within the food space, especially in underserved communities like Ward 7 and Ward 8, there's always opportunities to bring more different food products. We have everything from caterers to chefs to farmers that we work with, and they have their unique approach to solving the main problem, which is food insecurity. The Marionberry Avenue Market, 1303 Marionberry Ave, is an amazing market space. It's going to be this great community third space. It's going to include a space where people can go and grab food, like grab and go items. There's multiple commercial kitchen spaces. So fitting back to the Dream Program, when our entrepreneurs are ready to scale and take it to the next level, they can actually come and utilize that space. So that's one connection point that's with our many pieces coming together. Just by the way that the space is designed, it's very open, right? You can actually see into the kitchen and see. We're not trying to hide anything because everything is transparent, everything is real, everything is fresh. So just the way the spaces map out, it's easy to navigate and access like that. Also, I think it's the food in that grocery store actually is hyper super local. It comes from the community. It comes from the dreamers that we are training and helping them cultivate their brand experiences. When you look at Ward 7 and 8, there's only, what, like two grocery stores between them, and you look at more affluent wards and within DC, and they have triple the amount of grocery stores, if not more. And so what we're trying to do is create another opportunity, another source for people to get fresh produce, to have good food that actually nourishes them, and also creating a community space where people can meet up. You know, when you look at the results of COVID, one of the big impacts of that is we lost a lot of our third spaces. So spaces where you're not going to work or home, but it's a space you can be in community. That's what this marketplace is going to be. So people can go there, they could work in it like a cafe, or they can come up to one of our events and they can integrate, just get to know each other through those spaces. We also want to have like culinary classes there, other opportunities to not only support people by offering them foods and products and services, but also to educate as well. So we are at the Spring Fest. We're in the garden portion of what's happening now. As we're talking, you can see our partners, City Blossom, are doing a big volunteer project. So you have a couple of volunteer opportunities to get connected to the land and really engage with what's going on outside of your regular routine. We also have a bunch of food vendors happening. We have yard games. We have our farmers market, which is separate from our Marionberry Avenue market. That's happening right now. We're selling fresh produce from our mini partners. We work with farmers very local to us, and they provide everything from berries to packaged goods like jams. We have our own set of line of products with DOL, so we got the granola going. Our seasoned spices is like a legendary house blend. Like, people love that spice and they put it on absolutely everything. So we got that. We have other organizations and partnerships that come and set up shop and tell about the amazing programs that they do. So yeah, a lot of things going on. That's just one of the many programs we have here at Dreaming Out Loud. First of all our programs are intertwined with each other. So every program is its own leg of DOL, if you're thinking of like an octopus, and they intertwine together. They all belong to one body, which is the ecosystem that is DOL, that allows us to create an equitable food system and provide economic opportunities to the community members we serve. It's so many things, and I'm only really one part of that. We have an amazing team. It's not a huge team, but it's a mighty team. I mean, you have the head with Chris Bradshaw, who is the visionary. He dreams big, hence the name Dreaming Out Loud. And we've been doing this for quite a bit of time, and just seeing the transformation, because Dreaming Out Loud started off as school programming. It wasn't necessarily this big vision of this food ecosystem that we create. Like with DOL, you ask in the community, people know what DOL is because it's its own thing. It's its own living, breathing entity. We could talk about the farm team, who we have 2 farms. They help produce so much food and not only distribute it to our local communities, but also sometimes businesses as well. So we'll partner with different businesses who are looking for things like salad greens and local produce to make their offerings better. To meet that need, we intentionally partner because we realize we can't do everything, but we can partner with people who are locked into what they're doing. The Food Hub team is all on its own. It's everything from the CSA to the culinary experiences right at this event here. We have the other side is the farmers market and the CSA. There's an advocacy piece of Dreaming Out Loud that's just inherent in what we do, but you'll also oftentimes see like Chris actually in like council meetings and speaking on behalf of our organization, but the community at large. And many people on our team actually live in the community as well. So they have that instant connection and able to speak to what's going on. We call ourselves the Dream Team, for instance. That's just not because we're dreaming out loud, but it's really everybody bringing their independent experiences and just making like a super team to like get the job done.
The challenges in Anacostia underscore the need for fresh thinking. The consumer demand for innovation drives massive financial investment. We'll be speaking with Jessica Sidman, food editor of Washingtonian, about the most exciting culinary trends shaping the way we eat. We discuss how retailers are adapting to the explosion of new food options and the demand for convenience, and how local food retailers fit at this rapidly changing table. I'm with Jessica Sidman, food editor of Washingtonian magazine, and we are going to talk about trends that we see in shaping up what we eat. Let's start with the exciting stuff. What is grabbing describing you personally in the culinary world?
The DC area in particular has always been known for its diversity. There are so many immigrant communities here, obviously, the embassies. It's in a lot of ways a very international city. And I love to see the way that that is continuing to develop in the food scene. We're seeing cuisines that have been kind of on the fringes or marginalized in the past kind of have their moment in a more mainstream way or in more of a fine dining arena. I'm thinking of various, African or Afro-Caribbean cuisines, places like Dogon from Chef Kwame, who's, become this really top chef in New York and came back to DC, introducing diners to all these ingredients and flavors that haven't always been represented in the fine dining scene, and places like Almina, representing Chef Eric Ajapong's roots in Ghana, again in fine dining. But you also see it in so many other cuisines too, whether it's Afghan or Laotian. Like, those are the places that are getting me excited right now.
I also feel like there's so much connection and intersection with dining. How do you make fine dining accessible on different price points, but also accessible for different types of food that we eat? We're going towards a trend of more plant-based foods. So how would diverse cuisines, how does it compare with being able to eat plant-based?
Plant-based food has really taken off in a huge way in the last several years, and you are seeing it at all price points. You're seeing fast casual examples, places like Pow Pow. I don't know if you're
Love Pow Pow.
and then on the higher end, obviously, a place like Oyster, which is very sustainably minded, and the only protein they're really using is oyster, which has various benefits to the environment, but otherwise everything is just very beautifully done, all with plants. You don't even miss the meat. And, even places that aren't specifically vegan, vegetarian, plant-based restaurants, you're seeing their menus have more of those options. And, you can, not eat meat or seafood and go to pretty much any trendy restaurant and find those options, which, was not the case a decade ago.
That's so true. I mean, as someone who's constantly immersed in the culinary world,
Could be the future. We'll see.
yeah, a lot of food is based on health, sustainability, these ideas of convenience that influence what we buy. So, I want to talk about how food retailers and restaurants are adapting to all these changes in food innovations, but also just our preferences as consumers. Do you think retailers and restaurants are keeping up with the pace of innovation?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think, like a lot of innovation does come from the restaurants and retailers, and there's a lot of economic reasons right now, especially in DC. Businesses are incorporating more of that. Obviously, it's very expensive to operate a restaurant in DC, especially like a full service restaurant. And, so you are seeing more places incorporate some kind of retail part of their business.
Well, I definitely see in grocery stores and other food retailers, they're doing online and app ordering, delivery, and that's definitely in response to consumers wanting more convenience.
Yeah, and I think also the pandemic kind of forced the hand for a lot of businesses in terms of making things available for online ordering or for takeout. They basically had to do that in order to survive when there were these shutdowns. A lot of them have actually held on to that, and they still have the online ordering options, or maybe they have takeout options that weren't available before. Obviously, like the whole QR code thing. So there was a lot of technology that became popular out of necessity, but has kind of stuck around.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point about the QR code, consumers are getting more educated, and that's a good thing. People are doing more labeling, more education about where their food is coming from. There's a rise in these sustainable sourcing labels where they tell you what's in the food, where it came from. So I think that's a great innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, how do you think restaurants are adapting? It seems like restaurants are constantly evolving their menus menu and service models. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, in terms of the sustainability question, a complicated time right now, I think, because everything is so expensive. When you want to use local organic products, like that's even more expensive, and people are very price conscious right now. There's a lot of fears of a recession, and there's a lot of increased costs from inflation and, changing labor laws and all of that. So, I think there is balance of what restaurants are offering. You either have, seems like a lot of that middle tier has really struggled. It's either kind of the high end special occasion places that are, able to provide those local sustainable ingredients, or, maybe sometimes in the fast casual space, it's increasingly difficult to do that at kind of like a middle tier restaurant that's just trying to be like a casual neighborhood place. And then if it does become more expensive to order ingredients or products from other countries, then maybe that does force the hand for a lot of businesses to use more local products. But to me, that's like still a big question mark at this point.
That's a huge question mark and a great thing that you brought up because typically when you think about adaptation speeds with technology or sustainability and convenience, big chains are always going to win out over smaller independent establishments unless you throw in the wrench of what if there are only local products?
Right, right. Yes. And, especially with alcohol and wine and things like that. And yeah, that would definitely force the hand of like a lot of restaurants and bars to have to source domestic products, which is
Yeah.
not necessarily an easy switch.
If that would be like one of the good stories coming out, right?
Right.
Yeah, usually you think, oh my gosh, like what is going to happen if local foods and get shown a light? That could be positive. I want to keep talking about local food retailers. Small but mighty, these small retailers really have a huge outside impact on their local community. How do they promote healthy eating and fostering this connection between new food trends that we were talking about?
Yeah, I feel like a cool thing that's developed in recent years in DC is kind of this upscale bodega, if you will, places like Odd Provisions in Columbia Heights or Each Peach in Mount Pleasant, where they're really drawing in a lot of local products. And it's not just like, chips and cookies or whatever. They also offer some, maybe like lettuce or eggs from local farms. And, I see those places, it seems like they are actually flourishing. Like I see more and more of them popping up all over the place. There is that craving for, that local community place that has ties to the larger region and community. It's at places like that that you'll often discover local products that you would never find in a grocery store or come across otherwise. Like I used to go to Odd Provisions all the time, and there were so many, like an ice cream sandwich brand that I wasn't familiar with that then I became addicted to, and onigiri, the Japanese rice balls from Izakaya Seki, and but then you could also, yeah, get your local eggs and stuff like that. So, I feel like those places are so important to each neighborhood, and I hope that we continue to see them thrive.
So important. Yeah. Like you mentioned, these local food retailers have a closer connection to their communities, not just to the consumers, but to the producers and can connect the local producers with the people in the community.
Absolutely.
How do you think they can use this connection to help the community make healthier choices?
There are neighborhoods in DC that aren't near big grocery stores, that don't have easy access to fresh local ingredients. So that's where places like this can really shine and help their community. That's where people shop, is like the local bodega, or whatever it is, a local market, as much as they can offer a variety of healthy and sustainable ingredients like that. reverberates throughout the community.
I've definitely seen these local markets highlighting the local produce. Do you think they also have a role as a bridge to consumers to explore these newer food trends like the ones we talked about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, it's expensive to dine out, right? But it's less expensive to grab something from your local market. So I think you see products that are popular on the dining scene. Maybe it is like I was saying, like the onigiri rice balls, but like in a very approachable way. You don't have to dine at izakaya seki. You can just, pick up this little Japanese treat for a few bucks. But that's just one example. There's so many examples of that. Like I was mentioning, Afro-Caribbean cuisine really having a moment with fine dining in DC, but maybe there are certain ingredients, or spices or sauces that are available at these kinds of markets and are, then introduced to a wider audience.
I've definitely seen markets practice sampling to get people to learn about new food or to showcase a local producer. They're like, what is this? Oh, it's a rice ball. It's delicious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any advantages to being a local retailer? Do they have any advantages over the larger chains?
I think there's definitely a level of loyalty that people have to those places and passion, People really want to support these small local places that are really their neighbors, right? In a way that the big box places are don't feel like as much. And I think there when you see the places like that in trouble, there's really such an outpouring of support because these places are so integral. Like you recognize the people who work there, maybe you know their name. You have your little treat that you always get or your daily grocery, whatever. So they're really ingrained in their communities in a way that bigger businesses are not.
I think you're totally right. People intrinsically understand if they support these local retailers, they're actually supporting themselves and their community as well.
Absolutely.
Do you know of any support or resources that could help local food retailers? Do restaurants work with local food retailers at all?
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of regulatory stuff there. Like if you want to sell your sauce or whatever, there's certain hoops you have to go through. And some do, and some have become very successful with that. Little Sesame, for example, started off as hummus pita sandwich place, and now their hummus is sold at Whole Foods all over the country and super popular. But obviously, like they had to build the infrastructure for that and have the facility for it. Yeah, I have seen other restaurants getting into the retail space. The other one I'm thinking of is Swizzler, which they started out as a food truck doing burgers and hot dogs, and then they opened a storefront. And more recently, they've started selling frozen fries in the grocery store aisles. But it's like a healthier version of what you would find, normally in the freezer aisle. Like they don't use any oils. It's all avocado oil or beef tallow. And they're super, so, I think that was an example of like pandemic survival. We need to figure out something else. But then it turned out actually this is a great business model and they really leaned into it. So there are more and more examples like that.
Yeah, for sure. Where can listeners find you to connect?
Well, you can read my work in Washingtonian Magazine or Washingtonian.com, and you can follow me at Sidman on Twitter or X and Instagram.
Our conversations today have made it clear that the future of food is not a static concept. It's a fluid and financially intense process defined by new trends. Sometimes the future comes fast, but sometimes change comes slow. The insights from DC Food Policy Director Caroline Howe illustrated the critical role of strategic financing in turning an innovative idea into an equitable reality. It's a vital balance that every community should aim for. Meanwhile, the ongoing efforts at Dreaming Out Loud's Marion Barry Avenue Market serve as our reminder that all the exciting trends we discuss must ultimately have tangible, accessible options for everyone. Their journey to open the grocery store highlights economic hurdles that prevent food innovation from reaching everyone. Finally, the perspective from Washingtonian food editor Jessica Sidman confirms that consumer desire for new flavors and products is a powerful financial force. This consumer demand drives the need for capital investment and innovation. The fundamental trends we see in food are enduring, but the finances supporting them is what ultimately determines their success and reach. We must ensure that capital investment flows toward a more resilient and healthier food system. Thank you for joining me, Katie Chang and Eats Place, for Batch and Scale, the Healthy Food Financing Podcast. Funding for this podcast was made possible by the Healthy Food Financing Initiative Partnership, funded through USDA and in partnership with Capital Impact Partners. I would also like to thank the government of the District of Columbia for their support of the Nourish DC program. We encourage you to follow us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you like to tune in so you don't miss our next episode, where we'll be talking about the future of food financing. You can check us out at eatsplace.com. Until next time, feed your hunger and keep thinking about where your food comes from and the financial journey it takes to get there.